My name is Lillian R. Voss, 32, and I work in operations management for a logistics company in Chicago. My job is basically solving problems before they explode, building systems that don't rely on luck. I live a structured life. Gym at 6 o'clock, office by 8 o'clock, dinner around 7 o'clock. Predictable on purpose, because when you manage other people's emergencies all day, you learn fast that discipline is peace. My boyfriend Evan is 27. We've been together a little over 2 years and living together for 1. He works in marketing, mostly remote, very social, always out with friends, always a new crisis or celebration. He can walk into a room and turn it into a stage without trying. I'm the opposite. I don't perform. I measure. I notice patterns. Opposites attract, right? That's what people say when they don't want to admit the truth, that sometimes opposites don't attract. They irritate, and then one person starts shrinking just to keep the peace. The issue has always had a name. Diana, his ex-girlfriend from 3 years ago. When we first started dating, he framed her as ancient history. Toxic relationship. Lesson learned, done and dusted. He said it like it was a closed file, like he'd stamped it and shelved it. But somehow she was always in the room. If we tried a new restaurant, Diana loved this place. If we talked about travel, Diana and I went there once. If a song came on, Diana used to play this on guitar. It wasn't one dramatic thing. It was repetition, little echoes that never stopped, like he kept leaving the door cracked open on purpose, just enough for her name to drift through. I brought it up once, about 8 months in. Calmly, I said, I'm not competing with a ghost. I remember my tone because I'd rehearsed it in my head, the way you do before you say something you know might shift a relationship. He cried, called me insecure, said I was trying to isolate him from his past. For a week, I was the villain. His friends apparently heard a version of events where I was controlling. So I adjusted. I stopped arguing. Instead, I started observing. Because arguing with a narrative is pointless when someone is committed to misunderstanding you. Fast forward to 3 months ago, my company offered me a promotion. Director level, bigger team, bigger salary. Catch was relocation to London. It wasn't mandatory. They gave me time to decide. I told Evan the same night. His first reaction wasn't excitement. It wasn't pride. It was silence. The kind of silence that isn't processing good news, it's calculating inconvenience. Then he asked what it would mean for him. I said we could move together. I'd handle the visa process. It was a serious next step, the kind couples pretend they want until it actually shows up. He said he'd have to think about it. 2 weeks later, he still hadn't given me a real answer, but he had updated Diana on it. I know because he told me she thought it was impulsive and dramatic to move overseas. That was the first moment I felt something click into place. Not anger, not heartbreak, just the clean sound of a truth landing where denial used to sit. If your partner runs major life decisions through an ex-girlfriend's opinion, you're not the priority. You're the placeholder. Last Friday, we were at a bar for his friend Chloe's birthday. Loud place, packed. Evan had a few drinks and was in performance mode. At some point, Chloe mentioned running into Diana. The table lit up like it was gossip about a celebrity. Evan leaned in, smiling too wide, eyes sparkling like this was fun. Then he said it loud enough for everyone. If Diana called me tonight and said, "Come over," I wouldn't even hesitate. I'd go. His friends laughed. Then he added, glancing at me with that sharp little smirk, I'm not cutting ties with my ex just because Lillian feels threatened. I didn't argue. I didn't react. I just looked at him and said, that's fine, but I won't build a future with someone who's still building a past. He rolled his eyes, said I was being dramatic. Maybe I was. But that night, I accepted the promotion. I finished my drink, stood up, grabbed my jacket off the back of the chair, and left. No speech. No argument in the parking lot. No dramatic ride home together. I didn't even look back to see if he followed. The air outside was cold enough to clear my head instantly. I walked 3 blocks before I pulled my phone out. I emailed my regional VP. I'm accepting the London offer. I'm ready to move forward. He responded faster than I expected. Congratulations. HR will begin the relocation package Monday. That was it. Decision made. When I got home, Evan wasn't there yet. I packed a small overnight bag, not because I was leaving permanently that second, but because I didn't want to have the conversation while he was still in performance mode. I booked a hotel downtown for the weekend, cleared my head. He started texting around midnight. Where are you? Did you seriously just leave? You're being ridiculous, I replied once. I'm not arguing in public. We'll talk tomorrow. His response came instantly. If this is about Diana, I already told you I'm not cutting ties with my ex. I'm not controlled by anyone. That was the moment, not the bar, not the joke, that text. It wasn't about cutting ties because of jealousy. It was about basic alignment, and he framed it as control. I didn't respond. Saturday morning, I met with HR on a call from the hotel. We went over salary, relocation allowance, temporary housing in London, visa, sponsorship timeline. It was real, concrete, structured, everything. My relationship wasn't. By noon, I had a start date 6 weeks out. When I got back to the apartment that afternoon, Evan was on the couch, arms crossed, already irritated. He launched into it immediately. You embarrassed me last night. You made it look like I did something wrong. I took a breath and kept it simple. You said you wouldn't hesitate to leave with your ex-girlfriend. You said you won't cut ties. That's your choice. I'm not negotiating that. He laughed sharp and dismissive. So what? You're going to punish me. No, I said. I'm adjusting accordingly. I told him I accepted the promotion for the first time. He actually looked rattled. You didn't even talk to me. I did, I said, for 2 weeks. He tried pivoting. We can figure it out. Long distance. I just need time. You're rushing this. But he didn't say he'd come with me. He didn't say he'd choose us. He said he needed time. Time while still keeping Diana in orbit. That night, while he was in the shower, I started separating practical things. Important documents, passport, banking info. I changed the passwords on my accounts, removed his access to the shared streaming subscriptions I paid for. Quiet moves, not revenge, risk management. Sunday morning, I transferred my half of the joint savings back into my personal account. Clean split, left a spreadsheet showing the math. I wasn't trying to be vindictive, just precise. When he left Monday morning for coffee with Chloe, I blocked him on everything except text. Not to be dramatic, just to reduce noise. If he wanted to talk logistics, he could text. If he wanted to perform, he could do it without me. Blocking him everywhere except text wasn't some power move. It was damage control. Evan lives online. Instagram stories, group chats, constant commentary. If I left those channels open, I knew what would happen. Screenshots, half-truths. Me painted as the insecure girlfriend who couldn't handle a confident man having a past. I wasn't interested in defending myself in a group chat courtroom. By Monday afternoon, the first real text came through. Are you seriously moving to London over one joke? I stared at it for a minute before responding. It wasn't a joke, it was clarity. 3 dots popped up immediately. So you're throwing away 2 years because I won't erase someone from my life again. Framing, I typed carefully. I'm not asking you to erase anyone. I'm saying I won't build a future with someone who openly says they'd leave me for their ex-girlfriend. No response for an hour. Then he switched tactics. Diana is just a friend. You're insecure. That's the real issue. That word again. Insecure. It's convenient because it shifts the focus. If I'm insecure, then his behavior doesn't need to change. That evening, he came home acting normal, almost overly normal. Asked what I wanted for dinner. Talked about a campaign at work. Like the last 72 hours hadn't happened. I didn't play along. I told him HR was sending relocation documents Wednesday, that I'd likely fly out in 4 weeks to start apartment hunting. He blinked slowly, processing. So what? You expect me to just drop my whole life and follow you? I didn't respond emotionally. No, I expected my partner to be excited about building a bigger life together. That's different. He scoffed. London isn't some fairy tale. You're romanticizing this. Maybe. But it was still forward motion. He shifted again. And what if I don't want to go? Then you don't go. The silence after that stretched because he was waiting for me to say I wouldn't go without him. I didn't. Later that night, he was in the bedroom on FaceTime. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the apartment isn't huge. I heard Diana's name. I heard him say, "She's overreacting. She thinks I'd actually leave with you." Pause, then he laughed. I didn't hear Diana's reply, but I didn't need to. That was enough. I walked into the bedroom doorway, and he looked up annoyed. "Can you give me privacy?" I nodded. "Sure." Then I grabbed my laptop from the desk and went into the kitchen. I booked a one-way ticket to London for the following Friday. Not exploratory, not tentative, one way. If he noticed, he didn't say anything that night. Tuesday morning, he tried one more angle. "You're acting like you're surprised I'm about to lose." I set my coffee down. No, I'm acting like someone who won't compete for a seat she already occupies. That irritated him more than yelling would have, because calm removes leverage. He wanted a fight. He wanted emotion he could point to and call irrational. I didn't give him that. By midweek, the apartment felt like a waiting room. 2 people occupying space that was already splitting, moving around each other like strangers who knew the floor plan too well. Thursday evening, he finally said it. "If you walk away over this, don't expect me to chase you." I looked at him and said the only honest thing left. "I'm not asking you to." That line landed heavier than it sounded, because in his mind, the chase was the proof. The pleading, the arguing, the bargaining. That's what he was used to. The idea that I could simply step out of the orbit without making a scene threatened the story he'd built, where I was emotional and he was reasonable. Friday morning came quietly. No dramatic fight, no screaming match, just the kind of silence that feels permanent. My flight was at 6:40 p.m. I'd packed most of my essentials the night before. 2 suitcases, 1 carry-on, important documents already scanned and backed up. I'm methodical like that. Evan watched me zip up the larger suitcase from the kitchen doorway. "So this is really happening," he said. "Yeah." He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "You're seriously choosing a job over us." That's how he needed to frame it. A job versus love. A cold decision versus his warm, complicated heart. I didn't take the bait. I'm choosing a future that makes sense. He shook his head. "This is insane. Couples work through things. They don't just run." Run. Interesting choice of word, considering he'd publicly said he'd leave with another woman without hesitation. I kept my tone even. "I offered you a path forward with me. You said you needed time. I don't build long-term plans with people who are undecided about me." That hit. I saw it in his eyes. Not guilt, exactly. More like shock that I'd named what he'd been trying to keep blurry. He shifted to anger. "You're acting like I cheated." "No," I said. "I'm acting like you made it clear I'm optional." Silence again. Around noon, he tried softening it. "You know I didn't mean it like that, right? I was joking. Everyone jokes about their exes sometimes." "Not like that," I said. "Not in front of your partner. Not if you respect them." He looked frustrated, like I was refusing to participate in the version of reality he preferred. By 4:30 p.m., my Uber was downstairs. He followed me to the door. "So what? You're just leaving everything." "No, I'm leaving misalignment." That irritated him. "You're so dramatic." I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door, the same one I grabbed at the bar the night this shifted. I turned to him. "If you want to come to London, you'll need to decide without Diana in the picture. I won't compete. I won't negotiate that." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he asked the question he should have asked weeks ago. "What happens if I don't?" I opened the door. "Then you stay here." I walked out. No hug, no kiss, no promise to call. In the Uber, my phone buzzed twice before we even hit the highway. "You're really doing this." And then 5 minutes later, Diana says, "You're overreacting." I muted the thread. At the airport, I switched my phone to airplane mode and let the silence settle. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. 8 hours later, as the plane crossed the Atlantic, I wasn't thinking about whether he'd chase me. I was thinking about whether he'd even notice the space I'd left. Because here's the thing. If someone believes you're replaceable, the only way to test that belief is to remove yourself. And now the space was real. London felt colder than Chicago, even though I knew that wasn't technically true. Maybe it was just the weight of it. New city, new role, no backup plan. HR had set me up in a temporary flat in Canary Wharf. Clean, minimal, efficient. No shared memories in the walls. No arguments echoing in corners. Just a desk, a bed, and a view of buildings that didn't know me yet. I kept my phone on airplane mode the first night. Slept 8 straight hours. When I turned it back on the next morning, the notifications stacked in layers. Texts from Evan. Missed calls. A few from numbers I didn't recognize but could easily guess. I didn't open a single one. I stared at the screen for maybe 10 seconds. Not angry, not hurt, just finished. There's a difference between needing closure and already having it. He'd made his position clear multiple times. He wasn't cutting ties with his ex-girlfriend. He wasn't choosing definitively. He believed I was overreacting. He believed I wouldn't actually leave, so I left. There wasn't anything left to negotiate. I opened his contact. Blocked. Then I blocked the unknown numbers. Then Instagram, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, even email. Complete severance. Not dramatic, not emotional, just clean. I wasn't going to build a life in a new country while monitoring whether someone back home suddenly realized my value. That's not how momentum works. Once that was done, the silence was immediate. Total no vibration, no lighting screen, no half-written messages waiting for me to engage. It felt lighter than I expected. I made coffee in the small kitchen and sat by the window, watching the docklands wake up. People in suits moving with purpose. Trains sliding past a city that didn't care about my personal drama. That was grounding. Around noon, I got an email from building management in Chicago. Lease update confirmation. He must have contacted them to ask about removing me or extending. I replied with my official notice of relocation and confirmed my name would be removed at the end of the month. Practical steps. Final steps. I didn't tell him to move to London. I didn't offer conditions. I didn't ask him to choose. He already had. By early afternoon, I walked to the office to pick up my access badge ahead of Monday. The receptionist smiled, handed me the envelope, welcomed me to the team. No one there knew I'd just dismantled a 2-year relationship 4,000 miles away. They just saw someone stepping into a bigger role. That was the point. If he wanted to stay wrapped in the orbit of an ex-girlfriend, that was his decision. I wasn't going to stand nearby, hoping gravity shifted. I had already moved. The first week in London was structured chaos. New team, new systems, new expectations. I walked into a department that had been running on autopilot and was now being told someone from the United States was taking over. I didn't overshare. I didn't mention why I relocated so fast. I just did what I've always done. Observed, listened, started building a plan. There's something stabilizing about responsibility. It forces you forward. By Wednesday night, jet lag was gone. My routine started forming. Gym near the flat. Coffee at the same corner shop. Late evenings reviewing performance metrics. It was clean, predictable, controlled. Then Saturday hit. That's when the space tends to get loud. I was walking along the Thames when my phone buzzed from an unknown UK number. I almost ignored it. Curiosity won by half a second. I answered without speaking. It was Evan. I guess international blocking isn't that hard to work around if someone really wants to. His voice wasn't angry this time. It wasn't sarcastic. It sounded smaller. "So this is it?" he asked. I stayed calm. "You made your position clear. I made mine." He exhaled sharply. "You didn't even read my messages." "No." That seemed to hit him harder than anything else. "I told you I needed time." "Time for what?" Silence. Then he pivoted. "Diana and I aren't even talking like that. I didn't ask. You didn't ask because you don't care." "No," I said evenly. "I didn't ask because it's not my responsibility anymore." There was a long pause where I could hear traffic on his end, probably outside the same bar where this started. He tried one more angle. "You're just going to erase 2 years like it was nothing." It wasn't nothing. That's why I didn't drag it out. I leaned against the railing and looked at the river moving past like it didn't notice anyone. "I gave you a choice weeks ago. You chose independence over partnership. That's fine. I chose accordingly." His tone shifted again, irritation creeping back in. "You always have to win, don't you? This isn't about winning. Then what is it about? Alignment." He didn't have a counter for that. After a few seconds, he asked the real question. "Are you seeing someone already?" I almost laughed. "I've been here 6 days, so that's a no. That's not the point." He went quiet again, then softer. "I didn't think you'd actually leave. I know." That was the truth underneath everything. He thought I'd argue, compete, threaten, wait. I didn't. "You could still come back," he said finally. "We could just reset, start over." Start over with what exactly? He didn't answer directly. We just wouldn't talk about Diana. That told me everything. I straightened up. "I'm not building something that requires pretending." Silence again. Then his last attempt. "So that's it. You're just done." "Yes." No raised voice, no dramatic pause, just yes. He stayed on the line for a few seconds after that, like he expected me to soften. I didn't. Eventually, he hung up. I blocked the UK number. And for the first time since the bar, I wasn't wondering whether he realized I was walking away. He did. And it still wasn't enough to make him move. After that call, I made one quiet adjustment. I stopped answering unknown numbers. Not out of fear. Not to avoid accountability. Just because I was done participating in reruns. The first time it rang again 3 days later, I let it buzz until voicemail picked up. I didn't listen to the voicemail. The second time, I silenced it before the first ring finished. By the fourth attempt, I didn't even look at the screen. If something is important, it comes through official channels, not burner numbers and emotional detours. Work filled the gaps quickly. I was restructuring reporting lines, meeting department heads, mapping out inefficiencies. There's something grounding about solving real problems instead of emotional ones. One afternoon, my assistant mentioned there was a man who'd called reception, asking to confirm my start date. He hadn't left a company name. I didn't ask who it was. I just said if it's not business-related, don't transfer it. That was the last time it came up. Meanwhile, practical things back in Chicago started closing themselves. The leasing office confirmed my name was officially removed from the apartment. Utilities were transferred. Joint accounts had already been split weeks earlier. Clean. One night, about 2 weeks into the move, curiosity more than attachment made me check social media. From a work laptop account I rarely use. Evan had posted a picture at a rooftop bar. Same crowd, same energy. Caption about fresh starts and knowing your worth. Diana was in the comments. So were a dozen friends applauding his strength. It didn't sting the way it would have a month earlier. It just confirmed the pattern. Public performance, private chaos. I closed the browser. That weekend, I took a train to Oxford just to get out of the city. Walked around alone. No constant notifications. No debates about boundaries. No smirks across bar tables. Just space. There's a moment when you realize you're not waiting anymore. Not waiting for a text. Not waiting for an apology. Not waiting for someone to decide. That moment came quietly, standing in a bookstore cafe, reading an email from HR about my 6-month performance targets. I felt focused. Then my phone vibrated again. Unknown number. I flipped it face down on the table and kept reading. It buzzed twice more, then stopped. I didn't check because if someone only values you when you're unavailable, availability was never the solution. By the end of week 3, my schedule was packed. Team offsite planning, budget meetings, strategy sessions. My life was filling in around the space he used to occupy. And the silence, it wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. About a month in, the attempts stopped. No more unknown numbers, no more indirect pings through reception, no more random profile views from accounts with no posts and 3 followers. Silence settled into something permanent. That's when people start reaching out through different channels. Not him, not directly. First, it was Chloe. She messaged me on LinkedIn of all places. Said she just wanted to check in. Said Evan was struggling. Said the move hit him harder than he expected. I didn't respond. Then one of his co-workers sent a polite email to my old work address asking if I was really staying in London long term. It was subtle. Fishing for information. I ignored that too. The narrative back home was probably shifting. It always does when the person who leaves doesn't engage in public back and forth. No screenshots to post, no emotional text chains to circulate, just absence. 2 weeks later, something more concrete arrived. My old neighbor in Chicago emailed me directly. He'd been watering plants in the hallway and noticed Evan moving boxes out of the apartment. Apparently, Diana was helping. That piece of information didn't hit the way it might have months ago. It just felt inevitable. If you keep someone in orbit long enough, eventually gravity wins. I thanked the neighbor for the heads up and wished him well. That night, I sat in my flat looking at the skyline and realized something simple. I hadn't once considered going back. Not to check on him, not to reclaim something, not even out of curiosity. That was new, because for the first couple weeks I told myself part of this was waiting to see if he'd notice the space. If he'd realize I was walking away, he did. He just didn't move fast enough to catch up. Or maybe he didn't want to. Either way, the result was the same. Around the 6-week mark, HR finalized my long-term housing allowance. I signed a lease on a place closer to the office. Bigger, better view, longer commitment. That felt symbolic in a way nothing else had. I wasn't on temporary ground anymore. I wasn't testing the city. I was building in it. One evening, while setting up the new place, I found the last physical reminder of Evan. A photo tucked into a notebook I'd packed without checking. Us in Colorado last year, smiling, arms around each other like the future was already decided. I looked at it for maybe 10 seconds. There wasn't anger. There wasn't longing. There was just context. We weren't bad people. We were misaligned. I tore the photo once down the middle and dropped it in the trash. No ceremony, no speech, just forward motion. Later that night, curiosity nudged me towards something I hadn't touched since I landed. My blocked list. His name was still there. I didn't unblock it. Not because I was afraid of what he'd say, but because I didn't need to hear it anymore. That was the real shift. In the beginning, I told myself part of this was about seeing whether he would notice the space I left, whether he would finally choose. But somewhere between the unknown numbers and the silent weekends, that stopped mattering. The question wasn't whether he would choose me. The question was whether I would keep choosing myself. Work kept expanding. I was leading strategy sessions now, setting expectations instead of reacting to them. My team started trusting me. Metrics were stabilizing. Problems that felt overwhelming in week 1 were organized into manageable steps by week 8. It struck me how different this felt from my relationship. At work, clarity created progress. With Evan, clarity created resistance. One Friday evening, after a long meeting, I walked past a couple arguing outside a restaurant. The woman was saying, "I just need you to pick me." The man kept saying, "Why are you making this complicated?" I didn't slow down, I didn't stare, but the word stayed with me. That's what it had boiled down to. Pick me. And the fact that it felt complicated was the answer. A few days later, an email slipped through to my professional inbox. Not from Evan, from Diana. It was brief. She said she wanted to apologize if her presence had contributed to the breakup. She said she never meant to cause tension. She said Evan had been struggling and maybe I'd misunderstood him. I read it once, then again. Not because I was hurt, but because I was analyzing it like a case study. There was no acknowledgement of the bar, no acknowledgement of the FaceTime laughter, no acknowledgement that she had been part of a triangle he never closed. Just a soft rewrite of history where everyone was well-meaning and I had simply overreacted. I didn't respond. Silence is sometimes the clearest boundary. That weekend, my old neighbor emailed again. Not gossip this time. Just confirmation that Evan had fully moved out and that Diana's car had been in the parking lot more often than not. He added a line at the end. "Hope London's treating you well." It did. The interesting part wasn't that Evan gravitated back to Diana. It was that he did it so quickly. Almost like the space I left needed to be filled immediately. That told me something I hadn't admitted before. He hadn't been torn between us. He had been comfortable keeping both options within reach. That realization didn't break me. It clarified me. By month 3, London didn't feel foreign. It felt intentional. My flat had furniture now, plants on the windowsill, a bookshelf that wasn't shared. I hosted a small dinner for colleagues one evening. Nothing dramatic, just conversation, wine, laughter that wasn't performative. No one there knew the full story. They didn't need to. They just knew me as the woman who relocated for a bigger role and seemed grounded in it. One night after everyone left, I stood by the window looking out at the city lights. I thought about the bar, about the smirk, about the text that said, "I'm not cutting ties with my ex." I realized something almost unsettling. If he had chased me harder, if he had flown to London, if he had promised to cut Diana off immediately, I might have been tempted to believe him. And that's what scared me. Because the version of him that waited until I left to realize my value wasn't a new man. It was the same one reacting to consequences. I didn't want a reaction. I wanted alignment. A week later, Chloe tried again. This time, a longer message. She said Evan was considering moving cities. She said he talked about London like it was unfinished business. She asked if I would at least hear him out if he came. I closed the message without responding. There's a difference between closure and curiosity. I wasn't curious anymore. The last indirect attempt came through my assistant at work. She mentioned someone had called asking about company events open to the public. She described a male voice that sounded nervous, overly polite. I didn't need confirmation. I told her if it wasn't business-related, don't transfer it. That night, I sat on my couch and replayed the past 3 months in my head, not with regret, but with distance. I saw the pattern clearly now. The repeated name drops, the public joke, the framing of my boundaries as insecurity, the assumption I would stay. None of it had been dramatic in isolation. It was repetition, and repetition reveals priority. He didn't think I'd leave. He thought I'd negotiate. I didn't. That was the difference. And somewhere in the quiet of my new living room, with the city humming outside and no notifications lighting up my screen, I understood something I hadn't when I first boarded that plane. I hadn't left to prove a point. I had left because I finally believed the point was already proven. By then, I wasn't waiting to see if he realized I was walking away. I had already arrived somewhere else entirely.